Near and dear to my heart, so I'm really happy to be speaking to you today. And I was here for SuperPod 3, and I was just putting this talk together back then when they asked me to give the talk, so it was really fast, so this time I'll take my time, although...
I think we said, can you do a presentation in 5 minutes, please?
Yeah, exactly. And here's part of it. Okay, so Navy sonar and marine mammals, potential measures to mitigate the harmful effects. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about how all this even started. Okay. So there's me, this little fresh-faced kid at 19. I'm actually a blonde, but shh, don't tell anybody. So at 19, I joined the Navy because of 9/11. I didn't really know. I was so naive, in fact, that when I went to the recruiter, they asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I thought I was going to be a sailor. And they said, no, you can pick your job. And I said, oh, well, I don't know. And they said, well, what are you into? I said, whales and dolphins. And they said, you should be a sonar technician. And I said, really? Why is that? And they said, because you could be doing this. Training dolphins for the Navy. This is real. They have this. They do, the dolphins go look for mines and things. And it wasn't 100% of a lie. It was about 99.9% of a lie. But I was at 19, I was telling my whole family I was going to be a dolphin trainer for the Navy. That's not what happened. What happened was I went and worked with low-frequency active sonar. It's actually known as the most intense sonar on the planet. I didn't know until I went to school that it actually was going to, or that it killed cetaceans. So this is me right here deploying the low-frequency active sonar system. You can see that I'm wearing a hard hat there, and there's a little sticker that goes across. And I put a little a label on there that said, "Save the whales, stop LFA now," as I'm deploying the system. Always been an environmentalist, always. And it's interesting, so this system, in fact, is so massive that we're deploying 18 transducers. They're each the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. Goes down the center of the boat. That transducer essentially is a massive speaker. So, yes, so I got made fun of quite a bit, but I didn't care. All right, and I ended up doing 8 years in the Navy. So, sonar. It is an unfortunate necessity. I'm going to tell you why that is, because you can't just say, let's stop sonar completely. We can't do that. Part of the reason is that right now, anti-submarine warfare, ASW, is the #1 priority for the U.S. Navy. The reason for that is that all of we have a lot of fighting technologies for all of our submarines, including enemy submarines. And also the oceans are getting louder with shipping. In the last 15 to 20 years, the oceans have massively increased with noise. So this is why we have to use sonar. Also, China has the fastest growing submarine fleet in the world, and the fastest that the world has ever experienced. And the Navy thinks that the next realm of terrorist attacks are going to be submersibles and underwater mines. Okay, so 40 countries operate submarines, including Iran, North Korea, and Algeria. But the big bad boys are the SSBNs, they're ballistic missile carrying submarines. And we all have them, the United States has them, but so does Russia and China. And so China, again, is our #1 that we have our eyeball on. And Russia now, incredibly, after the Cold War, are starting to come back as a major threat as well. And SSBNs are extremely quiet. That's the whole point of them. They're really, really quiet. And so I have never detected one myself. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Okay. Chinese ballistic missiles, they can strike a target anywhere within the range of 6,000 miles within 30 minutes. And they can also hit many targets at the same time. So this is a major threat, right? I mean, we could have another 9/11 on our coast very, very, very easily. So we have to basically find a balance between national security and environmental health, and that's what I'm trying to do. There is another technology called LiDAR. It's theoretical at this point, so I'm not really going to get into it, but it's basically using light instead of sound. Of course, there's an effect for everything that we do in the ocean, so it's hard to say what that would be, but that is something that the Navy's working on right now. Okay, so I'm not really going to talk much about the passive sonar. Basically, passive is just a massive hydrophone, so like the hydrophone over at Lion Kiln where you can listen. It's basically it. You can just listen to sounds. That's what I started doing when I first became a sonar technician, was just passive listening, because we didn't have the permits to go active yet. Now it's almost obsolete because the oceans are just so darn loud. And so we can't really use passive sonar very well anymore. During the Cold War, it was something that was pretty primarily used. So I'm gonna kind of skip over that, and we're gonna go to active sonar right here. Okay, so low frequency active sonar is the second one down there. That's the bad boy. The other one, VLFA, the very low frequency, they're talking about using that. It hasn't been used yet that I'm aware of. I know that China is trying to look at using that. So if you think low frequency sonar is bad, very low frequency is very bad. Mid frequency is what the majority of the Navy uses. That's the one where most of the strandings that you hear about is from mid frequency sonar. And then high frequency, there's not a lot to say that high frequency is actually bad for cetaceans as far as we know. Super high frequency are like your fish finders and things, and it may be an annoyance, but we don't think it's actually detrimental to their livelihood. This is just a little bit of decibel levels of some of the things that are found in the oceans. Look at the snapping shrimp about halfway down. Those guys are loud. We've heard them, yeah. But low frequency active sonar about 215 dB, but that doesn't tell the whole story because the frequency at which it goes out is also extremely loud. Okay, so advantages of active sonar. It's very, very long range. So long range, in fact. I can't give you the actual ranges, but I'll tell you something that when I was during RIMPAC, which is one of these massive Navy exercises over in Hawaii, we were over there and we were going active with our low frequency active sonar for 3 days straight. And on the third day, we get a message from one of the submarines that was 340 nautical miles away. They said they hadn't slept in 3 days because of our sonar. So if that gives you any indication of how loud this is and how far it can go and how annoying it can be and deadly, I don't know what will, but it's loud. So they're able to detect contacts in never landing oceans, and they can determine the exact position of the contact. So unlike passive sonar where you're just listening, you can hear something but you don't know exactly where it is yet. With active sonar, you ping it, it comes back, and you have a pinpoint of where this contact is. So, but you do give away, here's the disadvantages, you give away your position. So if you're in a time of war and you're going active, you are a target. So torpedoes will find you. So you don't necessarily want to use it during a time of war. It's also harmful for the environment. You also need several pings to figure out what it is that you're actually pinging. Are you hitting a surface vessel, a submarine, a seamount, a whale? You don't really know. You have to have several pings to figure it out. It's also very difficult to determine the country of origin or the hull number of that submarine. So with passive sonar, there's something called a signature. You can listen and you can literally figure out the exact submarine it is, the hull number and everything. With active sonar, you're just pinging it, you don't necessarily know. Okay, now into the interesting stuff. Okay, so effects of active sonar on marine mammals. We talked about, basically when they say a deaf whale is a dead whale, certainly sonar can deafen a whale. I'm gonna go into what really actually kills them. And that is, well, first of all, beaked whales are most affected. The reason for that is that beaked whales are extremely deep diving. They're mammals just like us. They can get barotrauma just like us, so they can basically get the bends. So they're very deep diving, up to 10,000 feet, and they also dive for a very long time. So these gases that are in the lungs get saturated within their tissues. They can come up too quickly and they will get the bends. So those gas bubbles will expand within their tissues and cause massive hemorrhaging. Also, what they found, there's I'll show you this because this is a beaked whale that was found, and that photo there is a photo of its liver. Those are the gas bubbles within its liver. And what they found is that the sound pressure of sonar is so intense that it actually causes the gases that are saturated in their flesh to expand on its own. So think about this for a second. If you were in all of us have been to a concert, right, where the music is so loud and you feel it shaking your heart, you know? And sometimes I wonder, like, is this even safe to be with this kind of bass in this concert? But that's through a very light medium like air. If you put this kind of sound, times it by 100, and put it in a heavy medium like water, it creates these sound pressure waves Think of like an atomic bomb where you see it kind of blast out. Creates these waves, and it's those waves that cause this internal hemorrhaging. Okay. All of these are photos that have been correlated with Navy sonar use. Anybody recognize that guy over there in the white shirt? Yeah, it's Dave Ellifrit from the Center for Whale Research. That was in the Bahamas in 2000, and that's part of what War of the Whales, the book, was written about. We have this situation here with these dolphins. That was in Cornwall in 2008, and then we have Greece up there. So all of these correlated with active sonar use. I'm going to kind of bounce around this map and show you actual real correlations, and this is just scratching the surface of some of the situations that we've seen throughout the years. So in November of 1963, there was 15 Cuvier-beaked whales that were stranded in Italy. So yeah, it started that long ago. In 1989, the Canary Islands, we had 20 total different animals. Also, if there's multiple species that are beaching themselves or stranding themselves, that's pretty much indicative of sonar or of acoustic trauma. This one happened in Greece in 1996, 14 Cuvier's beaked whales. This was a NATO operation. This was the first time ever that anyone admitted that sonar actually hurt marine mammals. First time, 1996. The last time was in the Bahamas in 2000. So we had several animals beach themselves there, and the U.S. Navy admitted, this is the only time the U.S. Navy has ever admitted that sonar did affect these animals, was here in the Bahamas, because there was just no contest. Okay, and this was not necessarily Navy sonar, but oil exploration. 100 melon-headed whales in Madagascar in 2008. That's nuts. I mean, this oil exploration thing is kind of putting the Navy to shame in a way as far as the sonar use. It's so incredibly loud. It's louder than sonar. Okay, and then June of 2008 in Cornwall, England, there were 60 short-beaked dolphins. All right, so why does this hit home? Here in Washington State, we have the Northwest Testing and Training Range Complex. It's about the size of the state of California, and this is basically where a lot of our sonar training is done in this state, and also where they do a lot of bombing. So there's a bombing range out there. The part that's all striped, that is the Navy's bombing range, and this is part of the reason. And I know that Howard Garrett and Ken Balcom can speak more eloquently about this, but this is part of the reason why we think that the L pod is most affected, or why there's more deaths in the L pod than any of the other pods, and that's because the L pod spends a lot of their time right in that region. So they might be being affected by the bombing range. These are all the animals that the Navy has said that could be found in this bombing range, and as you can see, there's a lot of animals on there that are thought to be endangered or depleted. Okay, so this is the Navy's current mitigation measures. This is what they're currently doing to try to protect these animals. First of all, they want to do pre-exercise monitoring. So they want to listen for marine mammal vocalizations. They want to visually look for these animals. And then they want to use helicopters with a dipping sonar to try to see if they can, for 10 minutes, before they do anything major. First of all, I was never trained to acoustically find a cetacean or listen to one. There was a booklet that was in our workstation that I could open up and look and see what maybe that sounded like or looked like on a screen, but we were never required to do that, so I had no idea. You know, no one really had any idea unless you decided that you wanted to open up that book and look. So this isn't necessarily a requirement for any sonar technician. Posting trained lookout. So lookouts must go through marine mammal identification training, but it is not their sole duty. These people are on the bridge. They're looking at radar. They're looking at the GPS. They're figuring out what they're doing. They're not just looking for marine mammals. Also, they can't do it at night, so they're only effective during the day, right? And it's estimated that only 1 to 2%, or there's 1 or 2% chance of actually seeing a beaked whale. They're so long diving and deep diving. So, and of course, if you get any kind of sea state, any kind of waves, your chances go way down from there. So is this really effective? No. Okay. And then they want to establish mitigation zones. So power down the sonar by 6 dB. Now remember, low frequency active sonar is at about 215 decibels. Mid-frequency sonar is at about 248 decibels. So they want to lower it by 6 when a marine mammal is sighted within 1,000 yards of the sonar dome. They want to lower it by an additional 4, so a total of 10, when sighted within 500 yards. And then active transmissions will completely stop when they're within 200 yards. How many of you have gone whale watching out here? Okay, so our limit, we must stay 200 yards from any orcas. You see how close that is, right? That's pretty close. Okay, so they're saying, yeah, when they're that close is when we finally stop. This is a sound that can be heard from over 400 miles away. But we know we have to stop it when they're within 200 yards. Is that effective? No. Okay. This one I think is really funny. They just want to conduct safe navigation. So Navy vessel operators are watchful for objects in their path. They use caution, operate at speeds consistent with mission and safety, and they try to avoid collision with a whale. Yeah, of course. Who wouldn't? No, and not just Navy operators. Anybody would. Okay. So how can we then effectively mitigate harmful effects to marine mammals? This is what I spent my last 14 years trying to figure out. Okay. Oops. Okay, so first, we can increase simulated training. So every single time that a sonar ping has left the sonar dome, it has been recorded. And it's recorded, it's actually taped, so you can actually play it back in the system. So anyone can actually take this tape and train on former pings that have already been done. So what that means is that sonar techs can go out on the ship, they can even go out to sea, and they can play these things back. And the only difference, 1, there's not going to be sound in the water, and 2, the date and time will be different than what it actually is, and 3, your coordinates will be a little off. But that's it. Everything else is exactly the same. This is a great way to train. As a matter of fact, I trained this way for over a year before we got our permits to actually go active. I thought I was a pretty good sonar tech. So we say this to the Navy. The Navy says, no, we have a training protocol and you have to do real training. And we come back and say, well, but what about that guy, Captain Sully? You know, he landed his plane in the Hudson River. And how did he learn how to do that? From simulators. There's everything, there's so many times in the military that they use simulators for training. It's not that far-fetched to think that we could train using simulators, or at least increase our simulated training and only use our active sonar when necessary. Another thing to do is to lower decibel levels for training. So we can still use active pings, but just not as loud. Why does it have to be so loud? You know, just lower the actual volume of the sound going into the water. Again, what this will affect is your range. You won't be able to see as far. But if you're just training anyways, does it really matter that much? I don't know. The Navy hasn't come back and said anything about this yet. Not that I'm aware of at this time. Okay, we can operate further offshore. So most cetaceans and any kind of fauna for that matter is found close to the coastal zones, also known as littoral zones. But if we just move further away, we would have less impact on them. So the Navy said 2 things. They said, 1, they don't want to burn that much fuel, but we say, why don't you just go out longer for a longer training mission instead of doing a bunch of short missions? It's going to be pretty much the same amount of fuel. 2, they said, but what about the sailors? They want to go home to their families. You signed up to be in the military. You go out to sea. That's part of being a sailor, you know? And it's not that long, but go out to sea. That's your job. So, okay, the other one, conduct a ramp-up period. What this means is at this time, when sonar is used, the system is brought up, and then it just pings, and anything that's around just gets blasted. So what this means is a ramp-up period is to actually start the sonar really, really low, so really, really quiet. and ramp it up very slowly so anything that's in the vicinity can escape, get away from the sound before it actually is detrimental to them. The U.S. Navy says, no, this isn't actually effective. We've tested it in the Bahamas. And then this guy, Tyak, he's from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. He's been studying this for many, many years, and he said, no, our studies show that actually a 5-minute ramp-up period is efficient. So then the Navy comes back and says, well, it's going to give away our position if we do that, if we slowly ramp it up. Here's a clue, we're not in a war at sea right now. We're just testing and training. Who cares about giving away our position? Nobody's coming for us, yet, that we know of. So anyways, so a lot of these things don't quite make a lot of sense. Okay, also establish a dedicated passive marine mammal identifier, somebody who is actually trained to passively listen for cetaceans, because you can hear them a lot more than you can see them. And that is their number one job. That is what they do. It wouldn't really cost the Navy much more to do that. But if everyone took their turn on the ship, say, okay, now it's my 4 hours to look for marine mammals, there could actually potentially be a decrease. And it's effective for 24 hours of the day. It doesn't have to be daylight or sunlight or nighttime or anything. Okay, so where do we go from here? What do we do? You guys are, all of us, we all have a voice in this. What Naomi Rose talked about yesterday as far as the NEPA process, every single one of the Navy's testing and training regions has a permit that they must renew every 5 years. That's your time to say something to the Navy. That is your time to say, hey, there's other things that we can do, let's make a change. If any of you want to ever get a hold of me and I can help you write something to send to the Navy, I certainly send them a lot of stuff myself. Feel free, you can find me right here, SCME, Sonar and Cetacean Mitigation Effort. I'm on Facebook. You can find me that way, and I would love to help any of you if you want to have a say in it. Okay, thanks you guys, and the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I'm going to leave this, probably the smartest thing Dick Cheney ever said, so I'll leave that there. But I do have something to tell you about, something that happened just on Friday. Huge in the sonar world. It was found that the U.S. Navy's low-frequency active sonar was unlawfully given a permit by NIMS, the National Marine Fisheries Service. And that's because National Marine Fisheries Service is responsible for protecting critical habitat for any endangered species. And because they gave the permit to the Navy to use their low-frequency active sonar, the sound is so strong that it hits so many different regions and areas that they were actually not then found to protect, they were not protecting the endangered species. So at this time, low-frequency active sonar is not being used, and they're trying to figure out which areas they can use it, but it is small. There's very few areas on the planet that they can now use it. Now, this doesn't mean it's a mic drop, it's not over. We also have mid-frequency active sonar, which is the other bad boy. So, but this is huge, and it really sets a precedence for sonar and what's happening in the sonar world. So, thanks.
So we have a shared history. I was on the design team for the Trident II nuclear submarine program. But a couple things. First, before the ruling that the Navy can't use sonar, which just happened this week, last Saturday, when I talked about they set off an underwater blast off the coast of Florida that was felt as an earthquake 3.7 as far away as Oklahoma. That's one thing. The second thing that I want to touch is your list of decibels at which the sonar operates. 800, 120, 240 decibels. Our limited human ears start to become damaged from 85 decibels.
Right.
Rock concerts that I used to go to when I was younger have caused me to have a lot of hearing problems now, and it was 120 decibels. Right. A cetacean ear is super sensitive, not in the air medium, but in the water medium, and you're listing 250 decibels.
Right.
We're talking about complete orders of magnitude destruction of cetacean ears.
Right, if they're close to the sonar, to the source. So that's source level, but yes, and it does attenuate as it goes out, but it's still incredibly loud,
It
absolutely.
doesn't attenuate much when you were talking about a 360-mile distance where you kept people awake. Now, that's a
Right.
radius. If you double that for a diameter, you're talking about 700 miles.
Right,
700 miles.
right.
That's the sweep zone that we're blasting eardrums to kill cetaceans.
Right.
So what can we do if the Navy's not listening to even recently issued rules this week, and they say, we're gonna duck in and blast, pretending like there's an underwater nuclear depth charge to test whether a submarine can withstand the shock, and they sneak it in last Saturday.
Right. Well, I will say on the Navy's behalf, they really are trying to do better. They really are. They actually pay millions of dollars a year for people to try to figure out better ways. Well, number one, it's in their best interest to have better new technology relative to other countries, right? They don't really want to use sonar. They want to come up with other ways to detect submarines. So I would say we're on the right path right now. They're listening. Things are changing. But as far as what you were talking about with that depth charge, I mean, that's incredible. And I actually didn't even know that there was a testing range down there. So I don't know. I guess just awareness is the best way to be. Yes.
I have a computer background. When you were talking about the faux detection schemes using a human operator, it surprised me that it's a human operator. Why, given all the sensors data we have, the live listening posts around the world, and the ability to listen, why wouldn't you computerize? Why would the Navy computerize and use pattern recognition on all the calls they've been reporting for 50 years, and have some constant awareness of all the animals within 100 miles?
Probably because they probably never use their sonar system. If they try to be extremely aware of all the cetaceans around, they'd probably never be able to use it.
They don't want the data.
No.
Thank you.
No.
All right.
No. Yes.
The levels that you showed on your slide, are those the maximum levels or the conversational levels that you can listen to on passive?
The decibel levels?
Yes.
That's the source level. So that's right at the source. So of the noise, yeah.
Two dolphins 10 feet away from each other, screaming at the top of their lungs to communicate. I guess that's what I'm trying to visualize. Why would they be so loud in a conversational situation where they're communicating information about what they're doing, where they are, things like that?
Why would the dolphins be so loud?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, so it's almost think about sound in a way. Think of it like electricity, right? Like where it's amps, volts. It's the same kind of thing. So you have a decibel level, but the other part of that equation is the frequency. So if you have a low frequency, you can have a lower decibel level. It's still going to be really loud, but it will go much further. But if you have a high frequency, like the vocalizations of dolphins, they need a higher decibel level in order for it to actually break through the water. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And it goes right in line to Lori's talk, and hopefully that technology can be applied to seeing how those impacts. I know science is still figuring out propagation and how the animals, the impacts on them, we're realizing that they're processing in multiple different ways. So do you think, I know NOAA is going through a whole acoustic guidelines. Do you think that can be an impact? I'm trying to set even parameters like 180 decibels and those sorts of things. And drone research, do you think those things can help, as well?
Definitely. As a matter of fact, NOAA has a lot of guidelines for sonar use at this time. I mean, there's certain areas that are known as critical habitat for migrating whales and things like that you can't use it in this area at certain times, or you can't use it in this area at all. So we already have some of those guidelines. And so they do make a bit of a difference, and they are followed. With this new ruling with the LFA, it's just that the sound permeates so much of the ocean that it just couldn't necessarily be used. So, and it's just right now because we're not in a time of war. If we were in a time of war at sea, then that permit would freely be given. Because every single environmental law in the United States has a military loophole, every single one. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, when they were studying this to begin with, they put a hydrophone or a speaker off of California, and an elephant seal went very, very deep and put his mouth right over it. Was the Navy sonar operators, as a general rule, familiar with that little factoid? And does anybody here know what happened to that elephant seal?
I have never heard of it.
Has nobody ever heard this? Okay. Well, we'll find that out.
Okay. Yeah.
This is absolutely a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for presenting it to us here, and very relevant. A couple of years ago, where I used to live in Naples, Florida, there was a massive stranding of 40+ individual pilot whales. They tried to rescue them and put them back offshore with no success. They came back in. I don't know if there was an aggregate, but it was particularly longfin pilot whales. I investigated a little bit and talked to Fish and Wildlife, who was kind of quarantined the area off. Military officials were there. It was found out that two days prior, there was some activity in the Gulf of Mexico, which happens regularly. I had asked Fish and Wildlife if they had performed necropsies. These were animals that were euthanized. Very few, one or two, had died through the trauma of the stranding. The official answer back to me was, and I asked them, well, have you done necropsies? Will you do an assessment of the inner ear? And they said, well, we've done necropsies, but the inner ear was too badly decomposed for there to be an assessment. And it set a red flag to me, because obviously, how is it decomposed?
Right.
Typically, I know how the process is, they'll remove it on site. What's up with that? Number one, and number two, how can this dialogue, what is the protocol for the Navy if they are involved in maybe say a stranding, since they seem to be wanting to do this outreach to make everyone.
I can't speak intelligently about what their process is. I don't necessarily know when there's a stranding with if they have a protocol that they must follow, or who even gets those carcasses. I don't really know. But what I do know is that if the carcasses are found and they do a necropsy, what they need to do is look at their livers, look at the tissues around their lungs and the areas between the fascia. That's where you see this real trauma. That's where you see the air bubbles. You can even see these air bubbles in their tiny little capillaries, And so, they may not have had actual ear damage. They weren't close enough to perhaps have damage to the actual earlobe, but they could certainly have damage in their soft tissues that you'd have to really go in and look at. So I don't know what their protocol actually is. And I will say, if there were a group of pilot whales are those one species where you're like, oh, I don't know, because they're called pilot whales because they follow the one. So if the one beaches itself, they all will. And so I don't know, was it due to sonar or not? I have no idea. When it comes to pilot whales, I always kind of take it with a grain of salt a little bit, that was it sonar or what else could it have been? Because when that one gets sick as well and it tries to beach itself, they all will. It happens in New Zealand all the time. So, yes.
Have there, been any cases where the fish stocks in the area where they're using active sonar have been impacted?
The fish stocks?
Yeah.
Yeah, so sonar doesn't really impact fish so much. As a matter of fact, I remember being out on the low frequency active sonar boat, and we're going active, and we have mahi swimming off the bow, and the deck plates are shaking, and they're fine. So it doesn't really affect. It affects animals that have gas within their tissues more so, and that actually have an actual ear. And fish do have ears, but they have the little bony plate there. It's a little different than ours. But what I will say is that they have found that the stress hormone in fish is really high when there's a lot of sound in the water. So just increasing the sound in general is going to stress them out, and which will leave them susceptible to all kinds of things like disease and that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right, thanks.
Around this afternoon, if anybody has any further questions. Okay, she'll be around tonight. And we'll be